Hello, Las Vegas, Nevada. Once again, the fight capital of the world is hosting a massive UFC title fight. This time, it's Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier 2, and Chael P and I will be talking about it and getting you ready for it right now.
There's a lot of reasons why I wanted this fight.
The only reason I'm fighting again is to fight a guy that beat me and I beat him. This will be the only time that I ever step foot in the octagon again. It has to be Stipe. No one else matters.
I'm not going to let him do what he wants.
I'm not going to walk away because I can't compete anymore. I want to leave my legacy intact.
I'm a better fighter. I go out there, I'm just going to do what I do, destroy him.
I want my legacy and my memories to be left as they are.
At first, I'm like, yeah, the legacy.
Oh, I'm a world champ!
Now I'm like, that's all about legacy.
This fight's for legacy. This fight's for everything. This fight determines the greatest heavyweight the UFC's ever had. August 15th, you hear and new again.
Walk in, beat that ass, get the belt wrapped around my waist, and walk out.
Welcome back to a brand new edition of Ariel the Bad Guy right here on all the platforms. I'm Ariel, and that's the bad guy, Chael P. Sonnen. And Chael, I don't know if you know this, but it's UFC 252 going down tonight in Las Vegas on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. And I think you're in Las Vegas, and you didn't tell me that you were going. What's up with that?
I gotta tell you, this is my first trip since we've been going to Fight Islands. I feel like there's multiple fight. I feel like anywhere they're doing a fight right now gets Fight Island. Even if I'm wrong, but I am here. It's my first time, and man, this city's brewing a little bit.
Yeah, what's it like? I mean, I'm kind of jealous, if I'm being honest. I'm stuck at home. You're in the fight capital of the world. You're there for Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic, and I'm here. Set the scene for us. What's it like?
I take an evil pleasure in making you jealous, I must tell you. But look, Ariel, there's gamesmanship going around this city. Here, let me give you an example. Stipe's walking around talking about this cage is too small, and Daniel's going to be able to take me down. And Daniel's coming out and telling people, I'm going to take him down 5 times and leave with the world championship. Ariel, I don't know what either one of these guys' game plan is, but I can assure you it's not the one they told us.
All right. Well, we'll be here for the next 30, 45 minutes or so talking about UFC 252, which kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. You get 3 hours of prelims. You get the return of Jim Miller. You've got veterans like Felice Herrig. You've got newcomers like Kai Kamaka fighting on the card. It's a nice little 3-hour preliminary card. And then at 10 p.m. Eastern, only on ESPN Plus pay-per-view, it's UFC 252. Headline, of course, by the Trilogy fight, the retirement fight for Daniel Cormier, heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic defending his title against Daniel Cormier. You've got Sean O'Malley going up against Marlon Vera, Jairzinho Rozenstruik against Junior Dos Santos. Looking forward to that very much. Daniel Pineda going up against Herbert Burns, who missed weight yesterday, and Merab Dvalishvili going up against the magician, John Dodson. So let's start, of course, with the main event, Chael. And I want to ask you this, because you've been following collegiate wrestling since you were a little tyke. That's not really my forte. And I always like to ask you this question about, the legends. Obviously, this is the retirement fight for Daniel Cormier. But could you tell us, when's the first time you heard about Daniel Cormier? Do you remember?
Yes, I was mat side in a tournament called the Reno Tournament of Champions, which was in Reno. I was 20 years old. And there was a guy from Indiana named Nick Spada. Now, Nick Spada was an NCAA All-American. He was ranked number 3 or 4 in the country. So I stayed at Matt's side to watch Nick Spada because I was a fan and knew how good he was. He got thrown every which way but loose. He got absolutely destroyed by a young man who used to be in junior college and was now representing the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. And that young man was named Daniel Cormier.
So when you saw him back then, were you as impressed with everything? Like people now say, oh, he was he was this, he was that. Were you as impressed with him, or did it take some time? Was it OSU? Was it the Olympics? Like, when did you start to realize, okay, this guy is, a legend in the making, so to speak?
He started to make his splash through the NCAA, and he wasn't completely consistent. Now, few were. There's no insult there, but in all fairness, he wasn't completely consistent. I had a teammate, Doug Lee, at the University of Oregon, And Doug was Daniel's nightmare. And Doug never went on to make Olympic teams and do that kinds of things. Doug beat Daniel every time they wrestled, so I never really knew what to make of him. And all of a sudden, his senior year, he comes in, goes all the way to the NCAA finals against Chael Sanderson, and he gives Chael a pretty tough match. And after that, he burst onto what's called the freestyle scene, which is where you could make the Olympic Games. That's what's contested by the International Olympic Committee. And I mean, Ariel, he came into his own. He did 2 different weight classes, heavyweight as well as what's called 96 kilograms, known as 211 pounds. He ran through both divisions. He ran through everybody. I can't remember a time I've seen an American beat him in freestyle.
96 kilograms. Is that how much Alexander Volkanovski weighed when he was?
Which is funny you tease me for bringing that up, because when you put that into relevance, that Volkanovski competed in rugby at what Daniel Cormier competed in the Olympic Games, there's something there.
Yeah, it's special. It's absolutely special. So this fight, Stipe versus DC3, is a promoter's dream, right? You've got the heavyweight title on the line, which these days is quite rare. You only get a heavyweight title fight these days once a year. You've got the most decorated champion in UFC heavyweight history, Stipe Miocic, returning, most title defenses. We haven't seen him in a year. You've got the potential retirement fight for Daniel Cormier. You've got the fact that they fought twice before, and the first 2 fights ended in spectacular finishes. This is a promoter's dream. The concoction is amazing. But for you, Chael, which storyline interests you most? The fact that it's just a heavyweight title fight, the fact that it's a trilogy, the fact that it's a retirement fight. Which storyline here has you most intrigued going into this amazing fight?
What's so compelling to me about this fight, Ariel, is we have seen this fight twice with vastly different results. And I don't just mean that Daniel won, and I mean that Stipe won. Let's back up to fight 1. Daniel was controlled in that fight, and I realize it was just over 2.5 minutes, but I'm sharing for you, had that fight been stopped right then, all 3 judges would have given what limited action we had to Stipe. And then Stipe goes down in decisive fashion, and everybody forgets about those other 2.5 minutes, except Stipe, which is why he demanded the rematch. Come to the rematch, which is part 2. Daniel controlled that fight, top to bottom. Had that fight been stopped, all 3 judges would have given it to Daniel until they did it, until Stipe started digging to the body shot. So we have been so misled by these 2. And in many ways, I'm starting to feel they are misled. If I may offer you one example, Stipe, who's talking about the size of the ring, and Daniel talking about, I'm going to go take him down. There's been 3 takedowns between the 2 of them in the 2 contests, and Stipe got 2 of those 3. So for either of them to buy into the narrative that Daniel can just go out at will and out wrestle Stipe is just not what they've shown us.
So it's rare when a fighter just comes out and says, yeah, I'm going to take him down. I'm going to make it an ugly fight. I don't care. I just want to win, right? I just want the victory, because this is it for Daniel. He just wants to go out with the belt. Do you believe him when he says that? Do you believe him when he says, yeah, this is all about wrestling, bring your wrestling shoes? Or is there a chance, as you just alluded to, that maybe he's trying to throw a curveball, a little rope-a-dope, if you will? What do you think? How do you see it? I'm not talking prediction here, but how do you see it playing out from DC's perspective, who has told us time and again leading up to this fight, yeah, I'm just going to wrestle the guy?
A couple of problems. First off, that's not how he trained. Second off, that's not what their first 2 contests have told us. And third off, I do think that it's very relevant that if you go back and look at the grappling prowess of Stipe Miocic, in addition to the fact I can only think of 2 athletes ever, Mike Tyson, who everybody knew about the uppercut hook combo, and Babe Ruth, who walked under the mound and pointed where he was going to put the ball. I can't think of any athletes throughout time that have ever told us the plays. If you go to look at the NFL just by example, they would never let their plays out. There would be a lawsuit if the plays even rumored to get out. So yeah, there's something about it where I'm kind of dismissing it.
Okay, so you have this storyline that Daniel's certainly been playing up. I'm done after this, right? Win or lose, I'm done. I wanted to be done last August, he said, but it didn't go my way, and I stuck around for one more. Interestingly enough, Chael, Dana White tells Brett Okamoto on Thursday, I don't believe he's done after this, which to me was a bit of a head scratcher from a promoter standpoint. I appreciate his honesty, but saying it's a retirement fight is kind of a nice little thing to put on the marquee, right? To help drive up pay-per-view sales. Who do you believe? Do you believe Dana White, who historically says, when you talk about retirement, I want you to retire? Or do you believe Daniel, who has told us, like, literally every interview he's done leading up to this fight, yeah, I'm done, win or lose after this fight? Do you really think this is the end for Daniel Cormier? Or do you believe Dana White, who says, no, I think he has at least one more left in him?
Well, don't forget, Dana was making a guess, to use your word. He was saying, I think, but here, let's break this down real fast. This fight can only go 1 of 2 ways for Dana. Good or bad. So let's say it goes good. I could see him going out on top. And people like Dana that have already said if he goes out on top, he will be on the same page, on the same line as George St. Pierre. That is very high praise. When you're comparing a guy to the greatest to have ever done it, very high praise. But let's imagine it goes bad. And I think a lot of people are looking at it from that perspective that Daniel would never go out on bottom. Well, excuse me, there's a little bit of a problem, which is he is never going to get a fourth fight with Stipe. That is simply not in the cards. So where does he go? Daniel Cormier just becomes one of the guys? Does Daniel Cormier become a co-main event? Does he open the show? Where does he go? And so I don't really understand that. I think that you either go out with the gold or you go out with the silver. The silver may not be what you want, but it's the best you can get. And Ariel, in life, when you can't get what you want, go get the best that you can.
Yeah, to your point, 10 straight UFC title fight for Daniel Cormier. So he's used to being in these spots. I was on SportsCenter earlier today, and they asked me, what would a win for Daniel Cormier mean to his legacy? My answer was his legacy is set regardless of what happens tonight. Light heavyweight champ, Strikeforce champ. The man has fought them all, beat them all, except for John Jones, of course. But to me, win or lose, he goes down as one of the all-time greats, regardless of weight class. What I think happens tonight with a victory is it puts him in the conversation with the likes of, and you may not know all of these names because I know you're not the biggest casual sports fan out there, but names like Bill Russell, Ray Bork, Peyton Manning, John Elway. I wasn't taking a shot, but Jerome Bettis, Ray Lewis, legendary athletes who retired after winning championships. But Chael, the big difference between those guys and Daniel Cormier is telling us going into this fight that he's done. Those guys told us after the fact that they were done. Do you agree with me in the sense that regardless of what happens here, his legacy is complete? This is just gravy, but this just puts him in a category with legendary athletes like the ones I just named. And oh, by the way, Lennox Lewis and Rocky Marciano, heavyweight boxers who retired after being heavyweight champion. It puts him in that sort of category if he wins tonight with the belt.
Your list there could have also been summarized as 7 jobbers and John Elway. Okay, look, it goes like this. Let me put it in school terms. Let me personalize this. All right, I think everybody would understand grades. Parents like good grades. If I ever got an A, I got something very delicious for my parents. Known as a root beer float, which was 2 scoops of ice cream with some root beer over the top. It was a very big deal, but I only bring that point to Ariel because whether it was an A-, an A, or the coveted A+, they were all A's. And I think when you're talking about legacy for Daniel and you're talking about it secured, you are most definitely right, but there are levels. And while there's an A-, there's also an A+, and that is greatly different. And this fight is very relevant of that. Look, your last effort is a very important effort. I fully agree with you. He goes down as one of the greats ever. He does not have to win this fight. The mere fact that he's walking out and trying, that he's been in the heavyweight class 3 times in the UFC. They were all world title fights, and one of the 2 guys is the greatest ever. I mean, yes, it's something very special, but I would put a little pressure on his shoulders. I don't think we could just remove it. There will be something very special, and the adverse to that is that there would be a little bit of a fall, no lower than an A-, I agree, in defeat.
I can't believe you just called Bill Russell a jobber. I mean,
I feel as though Daniel either way should get the root beer float. Okay, if my father's judging this, he's getting that ice cream with the soda on top. That I can tell you.
I couldn't agree more. All right, let's switch over to Stipe, who, by the way, Stipe, a lot of fans like to say he doesn't get the respect that he deserves. He doesn't get the attention. He doesn't get the push. He's a great fighter, and he's one of those guys who doesn't like to talk like you, like Daniel, right? He doesn't promote himself. But if you look at his actual resume, if you look at his record, most title defenses, has knocked out some of the all-time best. Like, this guy is going to go down as one of the best. But do you feel like he does himself a disservice because of the interviews, because of the fact that he doesn't like to put himself out there? Do you feel like Stipe should be a bigger deal than what he is today?
100%. Do I say he does himself a disservice? I'll let him make that decision. Could he be a bigger deal? Ariel, this guy's a superhero. There's not a father alive that wouldn't take genie pops out of a bottle. There's not a father alive that doesn't take that deal for their son right now. What do you want your son to be? You want to be Stipe Miocic? Boom. Where do I sign? Right now. The man's a fireman. The man's a great guy. He's a husband. He's a father. By the way, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. And when you mention he doesn't talk trash, I understand we do this in this industry. That's not what firemen do. That's not what Stipe does. That's not who he is. He never sold out. He never tried to be a character. He never tried to please the man and fill the arenas. He's a competitor at heart, and he just happens to be the best. So I think there's 2 ways to look at it. To your question directly, yeah, sure. He could get a lot more attention and spend some more time on SportsCenter if he had a little bit more to say. The other side is he's one guy that stayed true to himself and still rise to the top. I think that's very special.
Okay, I want to ask you about this because on
do you disagree with that? I mean, if I went as far as to call Stipe a real-life superhero, That's
Yeah.
fair, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Heavyweight champion of the world and also works as a firefighter, as a dad. Has
In the middle of a pandemic, and he still
absolutely.
didn't miss a day of work. Come on, man. This guy's something else.
He's great, and no one has a bad thing to say about him, right? I just think, like, in many respects, he's a promoter's dream as well, right? I mean, he's got the look, he's got everything. He's a physical specimen. He knocks people out. He's not a boring fighter. Stipe doesn't get involved in boring fights, but for some reason, it feels like he should almost be bigger than he is, and maybe because he doesn't want to put himself out there. Maybe he's too busy to put himself out there, right? Maybe because he's a firefighter. On Thursday's episode of Ariel and the Bad Guy, we talked about the weights, and you were very interested in this. Interestingly enough, you didn't show up to the weigh-in show to talk about it when I invited you, but that's another story for another day. So I want to read you the weights here, Chael. First fight, Daniel Cormier, 246 pounds. Second fight, 236 and a half. Third fight, 236. So he went down each step. Stipe, first fight, 242 and a half. Second fight, 230 and a half. Third fight, 233. So a little bit of a bump up from the second fight. What do you make of how much they weighed on Friday going into this fight?
Extremely relevant. If we were to go back to that second fight, Ariel, that was a misleading number by Daniel Cormier. Don't forget that fight took place in California, which means executive director Andy Foster weighed the athletes in the following day, meaning fight day, and Daniel was up 12 pounds, which means for reasons that we'll possibly never understand, he cut weight for the heavyweight limit, of which he was 35 pounds under. But it's very relevant because if he does bring his weight down, listen, let me give you another example that you'll understand, which is simply Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis was one of these athletes that was powerful and strong, but his gas tank was affected. He found, I don't have to train better, smarter, or harder. I just have to lose some weight. And if I do, I will naturally be faster. I will naturally be more powerful because I will touch the target more times. And by the way, my endurance and my longevity over the course of the evening is going to be added to just by taking some pounds off. Daniel Cormier is the same way. He does have a number. And while you and I and everybody else are much like him, where we're searching to see what that number is, south of 240 is a very fair guess, and he happens to be south of 240. Look, the weigh-in is a situation, Ariel, to do nothing more than the old adage of judge a book by its cover. How do these guys look? What does their level of fitness look like? Daniel Cormier, and I got to say the same for Stipe, they look the best I have ever seen them.
Wow, that is high praise. Now, the first fight, I remember watching the first fight with you. I remember watching it in Las Vegas. We were both there at the T-Mobile Arena, right? And we were both like, wow, this is not starting off well for DC. I feel like people have forgotten this, right? Second fight, of course, it's all about DC early on, and then Stipe turns the tide. What does Stipe have to do to start the fight like it did the first time around, as opposed to the horrendous start the second time around?
Interesting that you asked that. The significant difference, of course, to the eye would be the takedown. And you'd be right there. Look, Daniel cannot, in my opinion, just go take Stipe down. I have never bought into the idea that he didn't take him down in rounds 2, 3, and 4 for any other reason than he did not see an opportunity to close the distance and go for the takedown. That is my own belief. However, if you were to watch those fights, there was significant good news for Team DC, which is if he gets Stipe down, he is very likely to keep him there for the duration of the round. So there is a theory that if Daniel's 5 takedowns away from a world championship. That I do believe. I don't think Stipe is going to be able to get off the bottom. But from what I've seen, I know that Daniel can get on top more than once. He might be able to duplicate it. But to answer your question, I think it was largely that takedown. I think it was the closing of the distance. It was something that Daniel did not try to do in the first fight. I think that it was something that Stipe did not fear and did not respect in the second fight until it happened once and he made adjustments. And I only offer you that because I think that we could go in with a level expectation that Stipe, expecting and being aware of it, not only because he felt it, but in addition to the fact that Daniel has been threatening it, is probably going to make the takedown that much less likely.
We'll get your picks at the end of this show, but one last question for now on the main event, and I feel like you're going to dismiss it, but because you were just talking about it, I mean, I feel like I have to ask. Small cage tonight. First 2 times, big cage. Tonight, small cage. How big of a factor is that?
Ariel, I don't know a darn thing about this small cage. I've been hearing about it for years. I don't know anything about the rings, the ropes, the cage, or wrestling. I don't know anything about it. Okay, well, hold that thought, and let's back up to yesterday. Old Chael stepped foot in the apex for the first time in my life. I walked right over to that cage on act. I was headed over to Charlie, but I had to pass the cage. Ariel, I stopped and looked at that cage. I turned my head and said, I got to tell Helwani, this is a small cage. I never know. I fought in cages. I never noticed it. Ariel, it's a small cage. There's something to this. Now, how does that change the fight, and what does it have to do with it? Well, I may not be able to personalize this. I think I can take Stipe and Daniel Cormier at their word when they say it stops the movement of the striker, which is what Stipe is, if we're to paint him with a brush, and it favors the wrestler who can narrow you down just a little bit, which is what Daniel Cormier is. So, I mean, listen, my whole diatribe I've been telling you about one cage is the same as the other. I will tell you, when I saw it with my own eyes, man, there's something to this, and that cage is small.
Finally, you admit that it is an actual thing. The small cage is a fact. By the way, I think in the WEC days you fought in the small cage, didn't you?
That's the one. That's when I fought it, and I didn't even know it. Somebody brought it up like months later that there was 2 cages, and they used the small one at the Hard Rock, which is where we fought. To your point, but yet I will tell. When I saw that thing with my own eyes yesterday, Ariel, I couldn't believe it. This thing isn't just a little bit smaller. This was This was visible. I thought of you, and I turned my head, and Ariel and I are going to talk about this, and I needed to, Ariel, this thing's small.
Wow. I feel like they're going to look like true superheroes in there, like larger than life, like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3, because that cage is so small. Okay, so that's for the heavyweight title. We've been talking about it all week and for months at this point, but there's another big heavyweight fight on this card involving a former champion. As you take a look at the heavyweight rankings right now, of course, Daniel Cormier is the #1 contender. You got Stipe. Why are you laughing? Are you laughing at me? What are you laughing
Because I love this fight. I love where you're going, and nobody even knows it's happening. This is the fight. You want excitement? This might be the fight right here. Please go ahead, partner.
All right, it's #5 Junior Dos Santos, the former UFC heavyweight champion, against #6 Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who's coming off that shocking loss to Francis Ngannou back in May, but prior to that was undefeated and was knocking everyone out. So tell me, why are you so excited about this?
Ariel, there's some things that you and I can't say, but people in our space tend to say them. It's one of the reasons they're not as good as us. And yeah, fine, I went ahead and said that. You can't tell somebody who's going to win a fight. You can't tell somebody that's going to happen in a fight. That's silly. You have to preface it. Well, I feel very confident in telling you, and very confident. I can't guarantee it. This fight doesn't go the distance. I mean, if there's anything that spells stoppage, I don't know that I've seen it in a period of time. I believe Junior Dos Santos to be the best boxer in MMA. That's a fun conversation that comes up, and it tips towards Frankie Edgar. You'll remember the great Freddie Roach making headlines on SportsCenter because he came out of nowhere and said it was BJ Penn. But you've always had this very fun dialogue. I have my own opinion, and I think it's Junior Dos Santos. But if you go and look at the resume and the history of Rozenstruik, I mean, excuse me, the guy is 27-3 in professional kickboxing. To put that in terms for you that you might understand, Adesanya was 29-3. Very similar. I mean, this is what this guy does. I don't know that Junior wants to play that game with him. I don't know that he doesn't, but I'll tell you this, he doesn't have a choice. Junior Dos Santos, as good as he is on the ground, is not good at the in-between of deciding if the fight's on the feet or on the ground. This fight's a stand-up fight between 2 absolute hammers. I just feel like for the first time ever, I can come with some level of confidence to tell it's not going to go the distance.
You know, it's
my
amazing.
own opinion.
Every time someone says it's not going to go the distance, it goes the distance. You know that,
Every
right?
time.
Every time. Every time. So we'll remember that.
Who was that one that laid an egg? Was it Kimbo Slice? And who was that? Remember that fight? It was off the Ultimate
I feel like
Fighter.
they said it about Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis.
Oh,
I mean, that's probably the most famous one. That's probably the most.
But that was a little different. Now, listen, we got double crossed on those fights because those two didn't fight. Right. We were, of course, predicting if they went out there or they actually did. So I only offer you that because, look, I feel comfortable with it. I really do, man. It's a fun fight right there.
Okay, so what about Junior Dos Santos? Because I don't know if you've seen him on social media. The guy's body is completely different. He's a lot more cut. He looks smaller. He doesn't weigh in that much different than he did when he was heavyweight champ several years ago against Cain Velasquez. But have you noticed that he looks a lot slimmer? And if so, what do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I think that USADA has a lot to do with that, in fairness. I mean, I just think that a lot of people deferred back to what Demetrius Johnson said. And I'm going to use his quote. When USADA came out, people weren't really clear on, hey, what can I do? Demetrius Johnson came out and he said, and I quote, "I am the world champion and I don't know what you can do. And therefore, don't put anything into your body but food and water." And I think if you follow that rule, I mean, I think you're going to see some of that. I've seen a lot of these guys looking really good and really lean, but they're also being just very cautious, really focusing on their diet, focusing on nutrition and some of these other things and staying away from the protein powders. And, you're hearing about a tainted supplement at this place or that place. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of that has been proven true. And I do agree with you. Some of these guys, man, they're losing some weight, but boy, they look good.
You have a Jairzinho Rozenstruik on the other side of the coin, who's coming off that loss 22 seconds against Francis Ngannou, just got blitzed and knocked out. do you expect, we were just talking about two guys who were gun shy, and Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou when they fought 2 years ago. Considering what happened in that fight, do you expect Jairzinho to approach this fight a little differently?
It's very fair. Now, don't forget when he got knocked out by Ngannou, it's because he did just the opposite. He walked right across through a leg kick, closed that distance with Ngannou and said, come on, guy, let's see how good you are. Well, he found out. Right. I mean, it was one of those things. Ben Askren had a great line. Somebody asked him on social media, how long did it take you to find out that George Masvidal is better than you thought he was? And Askren responded, 5 seconds. So the point of this is I do not know that Rozenstruik has any other way to fight other than close the distance and stay active. And no, I, for whatever reason, don't predict him to be gun shy, but I will concede your point that historically, when guys get knocked out the first time they are, I just got to remind you, he was born and raised in the briar patch. This is all he knows. This is a pro kickboxer that converted. That's a sport, man.
Junior coming off 2 straight losses, Jairzinho coming off a loss. Something's got to give here, right? One guy needs to get back on track. Later on in the program, we'll get your picks on that particular fight. For now, though, let's move along to the co-main event. We'll jump back up the card and let's talk about Sugar Sean O'Malley.
Welcome to the Sugar Show.
It's time to buy stock in Sugar Sean O'Malley.
Where'd you get these?
Crackheads from Craigslist.
Welcome to the Sugar Show, everybody!
Sugar Sean O'Malley is the UFC's fastest rising star. He's only 25, but already 4-0 in the UFC. You know who else was 4-0 at the age of 25? Current UFC lightweight champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Khabib Nurmagomedov! Wow!
O'Malley has 2 first-round finishes in his first 4 fights, reminiscent of Ronda Rousey's start in the UFC.
First round armbar finish for the champion, Ronda Rousey!
But it's more than just the wins and the stats that make O'Malley must-see TV.
Sean O'Malley has it.
I'm looking for somebody who has that thing. Sean O'Malley is that thing.
My show! I freaking love you, Joe Rogan.
O'Malley has the poise to rise up in the biggest moments. Think Luka Doncic burying a shot in crunch time.
Luka! Goes in! How did he do it? The best walk-away KO I've ever seen.
That was worth 100 G's.
His creativity, his skill, right up there with reigning NFL MVP Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson is a cheat code. He breaks the code. He can do whatever the hell he wants to do, whenever the hell he wants to do it.
I feel like I have a lot of tricks, a lot of sweet setups that I have that are gonna end in knockouts.
And his style and fashion sense would make even Russell Westbrook do a double take. Grab your popcorn, everybody, because Saturday night at UFC 252, you won't want to miss the next episode of The Sugar Show.
What a huge fight for him, a showcase fight. And by the way, I have to say, he may not be as highly ranked as Junior or Jairzinho. I love the fact that they put him in the co-main. The UFC is getting behind Sean O'Malley. They're pushing him the right way, and he's making them look good, right? He promotes himself so well. He's got the hair, he's got the look, he's got the robe. He comes out and he announces his own fight. He does everything that is asked of him, and then he gets in the cage and he knocks people out. His last 2 fights this year, tremendous knockouts. We saw him back in June against Eddie Wineland. He knocked him out as well. That's one of the knockouts of the year thus far. He's going up against Marlon Vera, who should be on a 7-fight winning streak, who I think beat Song Yadong when they fought a couple months ago, who is one of the toughest guys in the bantamweight division. Maybe not a household name, but by far Sean O'Malley's toughest test to date. First, let me ask you this as I kind of lay out the scenario here. Did you see that video? We talked about it on Thursday show. Did you see the video of Sean O'Malley promoting his fight, announcing it? Wasn't that brilliant?
From the throne, it's brilliant that he even has a throne. Like, do you go to the throne store? Do you know? Does your dad have to be a sander in the? Like, where do you even get a throne? Yes, to your point, I did go look at that because of you. Thank you. And yeah, man, it was a little piece of theater. It was brilliant.
He gets it. He just gets it.
He gets it.
He gets everything about. What do you love so much about this guy? Because I talk about him ad nauseum.
Okay, there's several things, but I would also like to talk about at some point what I like about this fight, because it's a lot harder than O'Malley's at least making out. Now, I think he knows what he's getting into. But look, Sean is just fun, and he's changed the game. You know, Ariel, if you want to talk about characters, and I think that's what you and I are talking about right now, you really have the old school philosophy of good versus evil. Even Vince McMahon bought into the heel versus the babyface, just meaning the good guy versus the bad guy. There's really no room for an in-between, but once there was, and his name was The Rock, If you can somehow find a way to bridge that gap right in between, I don't know if O'Malley's a heel or a baby. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. He's right in between. He's his own guy and he does his own thing, but something is always happening, and he adds humor. You know, they always talk about you've got to evoke. If you want to have a star, you got to evoke an emotion. It can be good or bad, but they have to feel something. Sean evokes the emotion of humor. He's right in between. He's very Rock-esque. Now, I'm talking about his marketing. You probably want to hear a little bit more about his fighting, but I do think it goes hand in hand. There's a lot of guys that are good with the punches and the kicks, but they've got to stand out to get the attention. And I do think that the recipe, no matter how much people like to deny it, I think the recipe is important, and Sean is very equal ingredients.
Okay, so let me ask you, do you think that he is looking past Marlon Vera? You seem to allude to that. What do you think?
I do not believe in his heart he is looking past, but I will tell you the odds makers have looked past. I will tell you that most of the casual fans are looking past. This is a very hard night out. This is for sure his hardest night out. Cheeto Vera has known about this fight for over a year. I spoke to his coach, Daryl Christian. They have been wanting this fight. They have tried to get this fight. They have not docked Sean O'Malley. They do not buy into the hype of Sean O'Malley. They believe they can get their hands on him and wear him down. And I will tell you this, Ariel, in all fairness, if we're using history, and I could even bring a name like Ronda Rousey into it. When you go out there and you start putting people down and you put them down fast, even though you prepare for a long night, somewhere within your mind and heart, you are very much believing you can probably also get this person out of there fast. And the worst thing that can ever happen, it's going to happen sooner or later, but the worst thing that can happen is when it becomes a long, drawn-out evening after a string of very short evenings. Cheeto for sure has what it takes to at least make this a long contest.
What impresses you most about Cheeto? I know you said you're tight with one of his coaches. Why are you so high on him, and why does he not get the attention that he probably deserves?
Well, I feel like Cheeto's very aggressive. I feel like he's done a very good job dealing with different styles. I personally look at him that he's won 6 of his last 6. And a lot of people would agree with me, even though he slipped that one loss in there. But a lot of people thought that was wrong. Now, I only offer that for it. I don't give a darn if you're 5 out of your last 6 at 135 pounds. You go show me somebody that got 5 of the last 6 right. Come on, man. It's a very rare thing. And if I'm right and he should have had 6 out of the last 6, he's got amongst the best win streaks in the entire sport, let alone the division, possibly the history of the division. 6 in a row is a lot of fights here at 135. Guy's very special. But within those wins and potential loss, he dealt with every possible style. He dealt with every possible scenario. He dealt with the heavy hitters. He dealt with the long guys. He dealt with the quick guys. He dealt with the ground guys. He dealt with the guys that like to go all night and try to break you mentally by dealing with your conditioning, your heart, your mental toughness. He didn't break to any of those things. It was quite the opposite. He's a very good fighter. Now, he's in there with a very good fighter. I get it. But I do think if Sean O'Malley beats Cheeto, and excuse me, he doesn't have to stop him. He doesn't have to get him out of there in a couple of minutes in a highlight real fashion. He just has to beat him. I do believe if he beats him, we need to close the book on this entire discussion of bringing Sean along slowly. If you beat Cheeto Bear in a co-main event that's got the biggest heavyweight fight in history as the main event, you're ready. Simple as that.
Could not agree more. I absolutely could not agree more. Earlier this week, I equated this fight because a lot of people like to compare Conor McGregor to Sean O'Malley. I equated it to the 2014 fight between Conor McGregor and Diego Brandao in Dublin, which was the fight that got him to the Dustin Poirier fight. Now, obviously, Dustin back then isn't the Dustin who he is today, but that was a big step up in name, in recognition, rankings, all that stuff. And now I will say that I think Marlon Vera today is better than Diego Brandao was back in 2014, in July of 2014 to be exact. But still, I couldn't agree more, because when you look at the rankings, and we could take a look at them right now, Sean O'Malley, 12-0, ranked number 14. You've got, guys like, I don't know, John Dodson and Merab, who we'll talk about in a second, but then you got the Cody Stamans and the Rafael Santos and the Jimmy Riveras and the Jose Aldos of the world. If you beat Marlon Vera, you should be in the conversation with those guys, right? This is the fight that gets you into the top 8, top 6, top 7, correct?
100%, Ariel. I only fear, and one of the reasons I'm really banging this is because I think you and I do have a level of responsibility as the Top Watched MMA show out there to make sure we let the fans know. And this is something that appears to be missed. Vera subscribed for whatever reason, but it's too late now to go back and guess it, to remain completely quiet. I actually, the only thing I heard him say going into this fight is nobody should be responding to Sean O'Malley. Come on, Vera, that's not a real helpful attitude because you're just not going to get the credit. If you don't bring the attention to the fight, you're not going to get the credit that you deserve. And if you beat Sean O'Malley, Cheeto, you deserve a pat on the back, my friend.
So I just mentioned the rankings again. Merab Dvalishvili versus John Dodson is another bantamweight fight on this card. So I like when they have multiple fights in the same division, especially those divisions that kind of fly under the radar. 135, not really flying under the radar these days, but maybe doesn't get the attention that the big boys get. So you got Sean O'Malley versus Cheeto Vera in the co-main. And then a couple fights prior is Merab versus John Dodson. And Chael, I got to say, of all the fights that people are sleeping on, I mean, I think you got really excited about Jairzinho Jr. dos Santos. The fight for me that people are sleeping on the most, and the one that I'm most excited about, is Merab versus John Dodson. I'm a big Merab fan. Everyone at Serra-Longo speaks so highly of him, calls him a great teammate, a great fighter, loyal, but is such a hard worker. He's relentless. Did you see him in his last fight with all those takedown attempts? The guy is just an absolute juggernaut against John Dodson, who's a hard guy to get your hands on, who's a former title contender a couple times at 125. I just like everything about it. And here I am setting it up, and you're laughing at me. Why?
I am not laughing. I'm smiling because John Dodson yesterday referred to his Merab. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep.
Referred to him as slow. Now, I don't think there's ever been anybody that could ever call Merab slow, but John Dodson is so lightning fast that by his own standard, that might actually be accurate. Listen, Dodson is completely dismissing, and I'm sharing this in a private interview. This wasn't his media face. He is dismissing because of the speed. He is completely dismissing this opponent. Maybe he's right, maybe he's not, but I agree with you. That's a hard match, that's a fun match, and it's a meaningful match.
Do you think that Merab is ready for the John Dodsons of the world? Considering what we've seen out of him thus far, is he ready? You know, Dodson's been around, and again, very quick. Anyone's slow compared to John Dodson, right? Because he's so fast.
That's the problem.
Do you think that Merab is ready for him?
That's why only John Dodson could make that statement without putting a guy down or talking trash. Like if Dodson's making the statement, well, maybe in comparison to it's true. But look, here's the thing with Merab. I like those takedowns. I like the pressure. I like the relentlessness. You're going to need a lot of takedown attempts to get Dodson down. He's very good and he moves very quickly. The one thing that Merab could do a better job of from a physical standpoint is to go for those takedowns and come back with a little bit of a surprise. He does that, but he doesn't do it enough. Uriah Faber made a career of changing elevation. He would change elevation and then shoot. He would change elevation, come up and punch. He would change elevation and hit you with the other hand, and he would do it all night long. But he made you guess. He made you guess. You're doing it right now. Go, Chael, where are you at? Where are you at? Where are you at? Well, imagine trying to hit that, Ariel. Imagine how annoying you are just looking at me doing that. Imagine you got to hit that all night long. I think that Merab does a good job of changing elevation. I'd like to see him come back. I'd like to see him come back and keep those guys guessing. I think he could catch them. I don't know that he does a great job with it. Very good fighter. I think that's something he can work on.
Okay, so there's still a little room for improvement there.
There's a little bit of room. There's a little room because you don't have to guess with him. You don't have to guess. He's coming at you. Now now it is an issue. Can I stop him? Right? We were talking about Mike Tyson earlier. Everybody knew what was coming. But can you stop it? When you're dealing with Dodson, I kind of think you can. I kind of think Dodson is actually prepared to stop those kinds of things, pick you apart and move out of the way. But Merab could surprise him. He could surprise by and going right back to his game. I just feel he needs to mix it up a little bit more. If I could offer a criticism, and offer. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be constructive. Constructive. Is it a criticism?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah. I think it's a fine.
I don't want
point.
to say. I feel like a criticism's negative. I'm trying to be a little more helpful. But whatever the word is, fill it in there and put my name on it.
Okay, fair enough. It has been a great summer for that team, right? The Serra-Longo team, Aljamain Sterling with that big win, Merab with a big win, Chris Weidman last weekend with the big win over Omari Akhmedov. You know, after Merab's last fight, he called out Sugar Sean O'Malley, one of several who have called him out recently. Do you think that there's a chance they do Merab versus O'Malley if O'Malley wins, or do you think that that's not a good fight for Sean O'Malley?
Well, I really think that the clouds are going to open and part for Sean O'Malley. I also, as you mentioned Aljo a minute ago, and I don't take any pleasure in this, but for some reason that fight against Jan that was alluded to has not been committed to, unless you'd like to correct me and know something I don't. And there's multiple guesses as to why. The outcome of Sean's match tonight is one of those candidates for the suggestion as to why that hasn't been filled.
You think Sean O'Malley gets a title shot?
It's one of the suggestions. And I do feel like when that fight has been held up, which holds up an entire division, there's something at play here. So I'm always open to a conspiracy. And when I don't have the answer, I like to spread those conspiracies. So maybe that's what I'm doing now.
Fair enough. It's a fun game to play, but let's be honest, I don't think that's happening.
Well, do you think it's Merab? I mean, let's just say I offered
No.
you one of two. Sean wins tonight. Does Sean go into a title fight, or does Sean go into Merab?
I actually think it's neither.
Less likely?
I think it's neither. I think he
Well,
fights.
I understand that, but those are the two options you've got.
I think there's a better chance of him fighting Merab.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think they want to put him in there against Merab.
Right, you see the problem? Like, it kind of is a weird thing of where does Sean go from here? I'm pretty confident in telling you it's not a tough, and I'm pretty confident in telling you it's not Merab, but I think that's the question you asked. If I'm recalling 1 minute ago, you asked about Merab. I don't think so. I don't think those two are next. No. Under any scenario, even with wins, losses, any way you want to do it, I don't
That's
think
fair. Aljamain would riot if Sean got the title shot above him.
A lot of people would.
Yes. Speaking of a fun game to play, Chael, you can go to ESPN.com right now and play the UFC 252 Pick'em game. These are some of the lines, courtesy of our friends over at the Caesars Sportsbook. You see them right over there. Daniel Cormier, a slight favorite now going into this fight, according to Vegas. Sean O'Malley, a big-time favorite, minus 300. You see Junior and Jairzinho are pretty close, plus 100. And 10 for Junior Dos Santos. Merab, a pretty big favorite as well, minus 250. And then Herbert Burns, who missed weight yesterday, but the fight is still going on. He has to give up 20% of his purse, a minus 265. So there are the lines. You can go to ESPN.com right now and play the pick'em game. It's always a lot of fun to do that. Let's go back to two of the fights we talked about. Junior Dos Santos, Jairzinho, Rozenstruik. Who's your pick?
Okay, you know what? I like Junior in the fight. Junior's been a little bit off point lately. I just think that he's got an ability. One thing that kickboxers struggle with, and Rozenstruik, regardless of some of his early success, even if you go and look at the fight with Overeem, which really sprung him onto the map, kind of put him one fight away from that title with Ngannou. The one thing that the kickboxers do struggle with is one of their best defenses in kickboxing is to what we call the shield. You put both hands up and you put your chin down as the guy tries to hit you, and you just let it kind of bounce off those great big gloves. When they come out and try to do that in MMA, because of the small gloves, the guy can send an uppercut right up the middle and put him down, and that's what Junior does best. I'm taking JDS by knockout.
All right. I like it. Sean O'Malley, Chito Vera. Who's your pick?
Oh, I got Sean O'Malley. I will argue for that he really is in a dust-up tonight. This is going to be a lot tougher. I will also argue for you that some of his own success can cause him a bit of a nuisance. Should he end up 8 and 9 minutes in? Should he end up 10 and 11 minutes in? When you're not used to that, you got to get re-used to that. That's going to be a nuisance. It's not going to be enough to stop him. The Sugar Show lives on.
All right. And before we talk about who your pick is for the main event, that's the one everyone wants to know. Let me just ask you this. We didn't talk about it at the top, and it's something that, you and I have talked about it. I know you don't love this discussion, but it has come up a lot. Greatest of all time. Some people have put the label of greatest heavyweight of all time to this main event, right? Stipe, most title defenses, Daniel, Strikeforce champ, UFC champ. Do you think the title of greatest heavyweight of all time is also on the line tonight?
Without a question, and I'll tell you why. There's never been a heavyweight that wasn't named Stipe that could beat Daniel Cormier. And there's never been a heavyweight that wasn't named Stipe. You go the other way around, however I said it the first time. Switch around. You get the point, Helwani. Quit interrupting me, Helwani. The point is this. Yeah, I do. I don't think there's ever been a heavyweight that could be either one of those guys besides their opponent tonight. Now, those records are only set to be broken. Somebody else is going to come along. But yeah, if we're talking about for right now and tonight, you bet it is.
Somewhere in the Netherlands, a young man named Stefan Struve is very insulted right now, Chael, because he did beat Stipe many moons ago. But I get your point. I get what you're saying. But you would put him over the winner of this fight. You'd put him over a Fedor. You would say greatest heavyweight. You could say greatest UFC heavyweight champion of all time. But you're saying greatest heavyweight of all time, period, across all of mixed martial arts.
Yeah, no, that's what I think. It is with high praise. I love that you brought in Fedor. You could bring in Cain Velasquez. Boy, we've had some real special ones. Randy Couture and Tim Sylvia had a short run, but boy, was it a good. I only say for you, but yeah, I really do think so. I think when you look at the level of athleticism, that's what's really changed over the brief decades. Sounds like a long time, but as you and I know, it went pretty quickly. But that is one thing that has changed. Boy, you got some high level athletes right here. You got a 2-time Olympian in Daniel. You got a guy that goes in and goes to training camp for baseball and Stipe. Don't forget that. People always forget this. Stipe was a two-sport Division I athlete in college. That's very significant. We used to talk about that all the time, and we've kind of gotten away from it because he's done so many other wonderful things. Could you imagine being a national qualifier in wrestling and being on the starting team for baseball at Division I program? He's a very special athlete, Ariel.
Yeah, that's right. Cleveland State University. So this is the big one, Chael. Your pick. Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier 3. They're 1-1. DC gets the knockout 2 years ago. Stipe returns the favor last August, almost to the day, in Anaheim. We were there together for the first two fights. Tonight we're together virtually. It makes my heart a little sad. Regardless of that, who's your pick?
I miss you too. And Ariel, I will tell you this, DC, but I'd like to tell you why. If you don't mind, I'd like to tell you why. I don't care about the punches and the kicks. I don't care about I know they can both punch and kick. I've seen them punch and kick. This isn't about who can get to the top, who can dip outside, who can dip the takedown. It's not about that. They've proven they've got the physicality, Ariel. This is a mental battle. This is a mental challenge. And when you're talking about mental, you're talking about toughness. And that also ties into another word. It's synonymous. You're talking about who wants it more. I've never bought into the narrative that Daniel Cormier talking about retirement has 1 foot out and 1 foot in. Excuse me. I see a guy with all his chips in. He has burned his ships. He has no other way out, at least as he sees it. And when you're talking about the mental side, which is all this fight is, in my opinion, they both know each other. They've both done their detective work. They both stored clues away, worked with their coaches, and they're going to bring that in and implement tonight. They're both good athletes. I don't care about that. In a 25-minute contest, it's who's tougher here. It's not who's tougher here. Who's tougher here? And right now, I just think that Daniel wants it and needs it more. I'm taking Daniel Cormier. That's a hard one for me. Ariel, it's a hard one for me. We know these guys can beat each other, but I'm banking on this, and I'm going with DC barely. It's a long, drawn-out night.
Decision or stoppage?
Oh, it's a decision. They're going all 5. This is a long fight, Ariel.
Yep. I agree with that as well. You're fired up. I love it. You got to get to the apex because you're fired up. You're gonna burst out of that room in a matter of seconds. So we are just minutes away. Top of the hour, 7 p.m. Eastern. Prelim start on ESPN. You got to check those out. 3 hours, 7 to 10. Then of course the main card beginning at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Chael P, the whole crew will be down there at the Apex in Las Vegas. You got to get going, my man. So I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to do a charcuterie board for you here back home since you won't be able to have one over there at the Apex. I hope they're taking care of you over there, so I'll be doing it in honor of you. And then I know afterwards, you and the rest of the crew will have the post-fight show for all of us. Tons of coverage coming up on our YouTube channel, so don't go anywhere. For now, though, Chael P, enjoy your night, my man. Can't wait for the fights. Thank you as always. Thanks to all of you who continue to support us and watch our shows. We appreciate it very much. Enjoy UFC 252. It goes down at the top of the hour. It's going to be a great night of fights. We'll talk to you soon.
With 2 title holders battling for the heavyweight belt, 2018's UFC 226 was a sure thing super fight. But who could have imagined at the outset how this blockbuster would become a franchise, an action-packed trilogy? Daniel Cormier, a new hope for the heavyweight division, moving up to face Stipe Miocic. 1 round that's pure do or do not. There is no try.
Cormier knocks Miocic down! It's out! History! UFC history!
A right hand, making DC a marvel, leaving Stipe battered but not broken. And like Godfather 2, the toe-to-toe sequel, even better. Stipe keeping his friends close, but his enemy closer until round 4. Now comes UFC 252, the third of the trilogy. And this thriller's got a flotilla of ship-shaped storylines as these champions go back to the future. Where they're going, they don't need roads to settle what they started more than 2 years ago.
I'm really fired up about a chance to make history. I mean, this guy's a great champion.
Every fight's the greatest fight of life. Fans really should be looking forward to an amazing fight. Don't blink your eyes.
When the 2 towers meet again in the Octagon on August 15th, with one king to rule them all the Tolkien stops and the action begins.
Thanks Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.